Well, welcome to this edition of the Anti-War Room. I'm Tom Andrews from One Without War. Aura Kanegis is with us from AFSC on my right, and John Isaacs from Council for Livable World on my left. This was the marathon week in the Senate. It was the all-nighter that many of us remember from our college days. John, were we any more productive in the Senate, given the 24 hours of debate, than you were at your last all-nighter in college?
Well, I was probably as tired after this all-nighter as I was in college. I think the main effect of the all-nighter was to highlight the fact that Republicans refused to allow a vote on getting out of Iraq. And it's Republicans, even an awful lot of Republicans in the last few weeks have been critical of the war, but when it comes to voting for a timetable to get American troops out, they're simply not willing to. I think that that theme was further emphasized when Majority Leader Harry Reid pulled the defense authorization bill from the Senate floor and prevented votes from various non-binding resolutions that really didn't mean anything, but something that Republicans had hoped to vote for. In other words, they're going to vote against a timetable, serious legislation to get out of Iraq, but they wanted to vote for non-binding resolutions that would have meant something.
And of course, Republicans are complaining very loudly that not only did they have to spend all night in the Senate, but then they didn't have a chance to have their own proposals voted on, and saying, look, at least we could have been making some progress. And some commentators have suggested, well, at least you would have had a break from the president. At least you would have some Republican members falling off the president's bandwagon if they were allowed to vote. Do you buy that criticism?
The Republicans have already fallen off the bandwagon, but now they're still only talking the talk, and they're not willing to walk the walk. So, no, I don't consider voting for a non-binding resolution that would have no impact as a serious effort to stop the war.
Well, I don't either, and the reason is that the only reason that we're at this point right now is because of political pressure, the political pressure being put on by many of the people watching this program. And once you take that political pressure off, once you give Republicans who go home and say, boy, I really don't like this war and I'm really against it, they come into Washington and they do everything the president wants. Once you take that pressure off and you give them a way to vote for something that does nothing but gives the appearance of doing something, then you take the political pressure off. Do you agree, Aura?
I think my hope is that the public is at a place where it's a different kind of political pressure now. The political pressure is to end the war. The political pressure isn't to make a statement or lodge a vote. The political pressure is people on both sides of the aisle should be behind closed doors working out what is the plan to get us completely out. And I think people want to see an understanding that there's really not a halfway in this situation. We've had a number of generals and commentators coming out recently to say, politically, sure, it makes sense to sort of withdraw or take it slow. Militarily, it doesn't work that way. And on the ground, I think what we're seeing is that the political forces that need to come to the table in Iraq to negotiate have no incentive to do so unless there is an understanding that the U.S. will withdraw completely.
Well, clearly,
and there won't be permanent
and the
bases.
whole rationale behind this surge was to give the politicians in Iraq the time and the space to be able to negotiate and come to a compromise. And of course, they've met none of the political benchmarks. There's been no compromises whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, our soldiers are going to be in 120-degree heat in August, and all the politicians are going on vacation. I mean, what kind of sense does this make? And, of course, by September, the September 15th report by General Petraeus this is the final report on the success of the surge. We all know what that's going to be. It's going to be more disaster. But it was interesting yesterday, over in the Senate, there was a video teleconference with the generals and Ambassador Crocker over in Baghdad, in which General Oriano, who's the second in command in Iraq, said, well, you know, September really isn't a real benchmark. We're going to need at least 45 more days. Really, let's make November the time in which we really take a real hard look and determine whether the surge is working. I mean, what the heck is going on? I mean, do they think we're completely either fast asleep or stupid? I mean, I don't understand. Do you get any? I mean, can we expect more of this? Are we just going to keep pushing the goalpost down the field?
The public has been very cooperative on that front. When you look at polling, every year it's sort of, well, we'd like to see withdrawal in 6 months to a year, and then the next year it's the same. So I think there's a hope that amnesia will continue. I don't think it's the case. I think people are done, people are ready. I think there is. I want to just touch briefly on what you said on the political conditions on the ground. The benchmarks, we're pushing the wrong benchmarks. We're pushing an oil law that's extremely divisive, while there's a revenue sharing law that's not divisive. We're saying we're doing a surge to create space for the political pressure, but the political pressure can't come unless we say, okay, but this is the date at which we'll leave. And the myth that a timeline for withdrawal emboldens the enemy is a ridiculous misstatement of what the nature of the conflict there is. It's a conflict that is between nationalists and separatists who need an incentive to know that there's not going to be a U.S. Massive military presence there for 20, 30, 40 years, that this country needs to have the space to build its own future that doesn't involve an occupation.
And of course, we have a new national intelligence estimate that says that Al-Qaeda is rebuilding, it's resurgent, it's stronger now than it's been in a couple of years, it's increasing its capacity. And two reasons are cited. One is, of course, in northwest Pakistan, they have a new safe haven, given the deal that President Musharraf made with the Taliban. And, of course, as the CIA has reported, the insurgents are building their ranks, strengthening their ranks, using the U.S. military occupation of Iraq as the single most important and powerful recruitment tool. So add all this to the mix, and it just seems that you've really got to be a spinmeister to try to get anything out of this other than this is a complete disaster. But nonetheless, there's Tony Snow this week, and there's the president's saying we are making progress. A very interesting idea of progress.
The White House has no idea how to conduct a war, but it does know how to conduct spin. It can't win the Iraq war, it can't figure out what to do, but it can conduct an awful lot of spin between now and September. September is the deadline, September is the time when we have to put the pressure, between now and then, put the pressure on, especially speaking to Republican senators and House members, that they have to vote to end the war.
Okay, so that is our mission right now. Between now and September 15th, this is when, and of course, Senator Reid, the majority leader, made it very clear that he is betting, as he says, that during the month of August, when the senators go home and they get an earful from their constituents, they're going to come back and the tide is going to turn, and finally we're going to be able to end this war by virtue of the political pressure. So this is a very, very important month coming up, and we're going to talk more about that next week, exactly what the plans are. Of course, this is the week, if you want to speak with your senator or your House member, this is the week to call them and set up an appointment. And we have our friends at Working Assets and other groups who are helping to make that happen. So that's very, very important. But we're going to talk more about what exactly is going on around the country next week. But I want to ask you, Aura, about the House. Now, we've heard that the Speaker Pelosi, has said that there will be votes on Iraq coming up this week. What can we expect over in the House?
I think there's likely to be a standalone bill, and then we'll be seeing the defense appropriations bill. We're hearing from leadership a vote a week is is what they're thinking. Obviously, there's the August recess, but I think through September and possibly through bringing an end to this war, I think there are increasing numbers of people on both sides of the aisle who want to be legislators, who want to get this work done for their constituents, and not just make speeches. I think even that the public is going to get tired of hearing. I think last night on Jon Stewart they had the White House quoted saying, "Okay, we've got 50% of Al Qaeda wiped out. Now we've got 2/3. Now we've got 3/4," and they were showing the dates go by. I think the spin is getting really tired, and people are understanding very fundamentally the ways that this conflict has done everything that the administration said it would not, and said it was aimed to end.
So Al-Qaeda is down to 3 very powerful guys. Is that it? Is that what Jon Stewart was reporting last night?
Yeah,
John, anything to add before we
I would expect 3 votes in the next 2 weeks in the House. One is a straight withdrawal from Iraq vote. One is no permanent bases in Iraq, and the third being requiring rest time for soldiers before they get sent back to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Okay, all very outrageous proposals, obviously, from the point of view of the Bush administration. But let's get those phones ringing in those House offices to push those. We have 2 weeks left. Right before Congress takes their August vacation. We already know that the Parliament in Iraq is going to take its August vacation, and it's going to be anything other than a vacation for our soldiers on the ground in Iraq, and that's, of course, what our mission is to get those soldiers home. Thanks very much for joining us. We're going to be back next week to talk about what's happening in the House next week and begin to talk about all the plans being made for August and making it a very hot summer for those members of the House and Senate who continue to insist on supporting the Bush debacle in Iraq. Thanks very much for joining us. Aura Kanegis, John Isaacs, Tom Andrews, we'll see you next week.